Hello guys, so I'm live for our second Q&A for the KCL OFMD team. So welcome to those of you who have just joined. So this again is another open Q&A, although given the time of year, I think there'll probably be focus on those of you with upcoming interviews or those of you thinking about joining one of our programs in the summer or would like more information in general. So the floor is open to you to ask any questions you have. Otherwise, I will talk about the lecture program and what you guys can get out of it. Hello, Sarah. Sarah, do you have any questions I can help you with? I'm sure more people will drop in as time goes on. If not, I'm here to answer your questions as you like. But it could just be, say, an inquiry about the lecture program in general, an interview you have coming up, or say anything else about the application process. So last week we had quite a few questions about the UCAT, and I'm very happy to answer those as well and offer any advice or guidance I can give. But otherwise, great. Okay. Yeah, Sarah, so that's fair. I've had quite a few emails from students from the programs I run. So K+, MedView, the lecture series, I've had quite a few emails from people saying they haven't received an interview invite yet. That's still, the decisions are still being made. So medicine, I believe they've started to roll out those interview invites to people for the main standard course, because I was actually on an interview panel last week because they started interviews. For the EMDP, that process hasn't started yet. So if you haven't heard anything, please don't worry, because you will hear hopefully quite soon. But in the meantime, you can start to practice your interview technique and think about reflecting and what you might want to talk about at interview. But hopefully you'll hear from any other universities you've applied to as well. But yeah, happy to offer any insight into what you can do to maximise your interview answers. But I'm sure you're doing lots of good prep already. And I can see my colleague Sarah has joined from the main team as well. So thanks, Sarah, for joining with our main KCLWP account. But I will continue. I will talk about the interviews then for you, Sarah, unless you have any other specific questions. But we'll see if anyone else drops in as the sort of next 20 minutes goes on that I said I would be live for. But in terms of delivering a good interview response, what I typically look for from an interviewee is for someone to answer the question with a degree of energy, enthusiasm, displaying a clear interest in the subject area that they've rehearsed, not rehearsed like specifically, but they practiced their interview, that they thought about it, and they can provide examples with like a clear amount of reflection, and they're not just describing what they've done. So they've actually taken a moment out of their time. I can see my colleague Anika's joined as well. Hello, Anika. I taken a moment following an experience to think about, okay, what have I actually gained from this? And so I like to give the lecture series as an example. So imagine that you took part last year or took part in one of our summer schools, say K+, and you just said, I did 80% of K+. That in itself doesn't really tell us too much as an interviewer and isn't particularly interesting as well. So really it's those range of experiences that make an applicant interesting. But you can look at any one experience like K+, and see the range of things you do within it and talk about those. So in a sense, you don't have to have done loads of different programs either. You can take one experience like K+ and start to really reflect on and think about, what did I do during that program? What did I find interesting in particular? And what did I gain in terms of my skills that better prepare me for my role as a medical student? And if any of you took part in a scheme like K+, whether that's at King's, or maybe you took part in something like Target Medicine at UCL, those kind of programs give you plenty of opportunity to think about how you would be a good applicant for a degree like medicine, and give you lots of opportunity as well to practice those skills. So a summer school I ran over the summer, called the London Med Summer School, students actually practiced empathy by working with a real patient. Now, besides work experience, I can't really think of any other better example of how you could talk about that specific skill at interview. And I do hope that our students who are on that programme, when it comes to being interviewed, utilise that to its maximum. Oh, cool. So welcome to those of you that have joined. I've seen we've had a few people come in, a few people drop out, as is expected with live, but I'll just keep answering questions as they come in. So Ashir, thank you for your question. So you've got into K+ Dentistry. Well done. I will be seeing you on that programme. Do you think that there is anything else I can do to improve my application? Ashir, that's a really good question. Thank you for posting it. I'm really excited to hear that you're on the K+ Dentistry programme. My colleague Sarah, who's also on this call, will be leading the medicine and dentistry aspects of that programme, so you'll get to know her really well. As well as myself, I'll definitely be along for a good chunk of it, so I look forward to seeing you in person. But in terms of how you can improve your application, I discussed this last week quite a lot as well, but when it comes to it, you don't need to start looking at it right now, but doing well on your UCAT will definitely help you. So when it comes to putting in the time, putting in the hours, putting in that time to practice, definitely think about using your time effectively to put in the practice and the reps in to do well on your UCAT, because that will make a big difference to your application. In terms of other things you can do, so we will equip you with lots of good opportunities. Me and Sarah have been discussing them today, what we can do for our K+ medics and dentists, like cool, interesting activities that will enhance your application. As part of K+ Dentistry, you will also have the opportunity to actually practice in the clinical skills suite that our current dental students use. So we'll be arranging that probably for some point in the summer, so you've got that to look forward to. But because you're applying to a healthcare course as well, any additional experience you can get working with the public, whether that's in health role, so maybe in terms of like a community role, working with, say, the classic example is like a volunteer in an old people's home, but anything like that will be valuable to your application, where you're working with the public, having to present yourself professionally, having to be empathetic. All of that will be really valuable. So I'd really recommend that you start to look at those volunteering experiences, because the earlier you do that, you'll beat that rush when everyone else thinks, oh, I need to do this now. So have a look at experiences like that. And then obviously any work experience you can get in like a dental clinic, whether that's shadowing a dentist, a dental nurse, a hygienist, is going to be valuable as well. So now you know dentistry is kind of the thing you want to do because you've joined K+ Dentistry. Start to look to see whether you can get some kind of work experience like that as well. So in summary, sort of work experience, clinical experience, volunteering experience, anything with customer service as well. So working in like a local pharmacy would be valuable as well. And other than that, you know, still read around the subject, build your knowledge of what dentists do. So what I would say to you now, Ashir, is, you know, literally go on Google Jamboard, create a mind map, and right in the middle of it, what do dentists do? And then you could create a second one called what do dental students do? And I would flesh that out over your time of doing K+. And actually, when it comes to interview, if you can just reflect on those two slides, you'll be like a cut above everyone else, I promise you. So put in that work now and you will thank yourself later. Just have it so you can just open it every time something comes to you. I think that's something I try and encourage our students to do, and I will talk about a lot more. So thanks, Ashir. So I can see you followed up. Sarah, I will come back to your bit. So Sarah, you said after interview you get a decision sooner. So actually the interview window, Sarah, is it runs actually into the new year. I think it goes all the way up to more or less the end of February. Like, we interview hundreds of students, so it takes quite a long time. And so the decision window runs all the way up till more or less early May. So even after you've been interviewed, even if you've been interviewed, say, in November, you may not hear till May. So if anything, doing your interview sooner just means you have to wait longer to hear. But yeah, just within that time period, obviously, you still need to go about study well, because you still need to make sure you're getting those grades. But it's just because we interview so many people, there's this big decision-making process afterwards. And so, yeah, being interviewed earlier doesn't necessarily mean you'll get a decision earlier. Everyone will get interviewed and then they will be looked at overall. So it won't advantage people to be interviewed earlier. So Ashia, you followed up. I see you, thank you. Great, that's amazing. So Ashia, you've got work experience in Guy's Hospital already in January. That's awesome. So you're already ahead of the game, so really well done. I'm assuming that's in dentistry, or it could be medicine. Either or is going to be really, really valuable to you. So really well done for securing that, and you're really ahead of the game. And in terms of things to remember and note, and I will answer this because it's a really good question again, because hopefully lots of you, or those of you on the call, are thinking about, these experiences and what you can gain from them. Really, yeah, try and make a note of each day. So have a notepad, whether that's on your phone or something on pen and paper. Write down those notable things. So on, say, day one, say you're doing 3 days of work experience, say on day one, I'd have a header saying interactions, and then bullet point interesting interactions you had throughout the day. And you can note down those that you had with patients, those that you had with medical professionals, and what those interactions involved. I'd also reflect on anything that really stood out to you that was in particular, that was interesting, that maybe happened within the service. So you're going in January, so it's going to be quite a busy period for the NHS. So you can think about, how did the doctors and other healthcare professionals, the dentists, work together to deal with the increased stress of that period? How did they come together? This is a term we talk about all the time, the multidisciplinary team. How did that come together to deliver healthcare services to patients? So that's something that will look really good in an interview, if you can reflect on how the team really worked together to deliver those healthcare services. That will, if you can make notes of how that worked from your perspective, and say how they communicated together, how they, how they communicated, how they dealt with problems, problem solving, and how doctors or other healthcare professionals demonstrated leadership, and then anything you did as well. So make a note. I'd have another header saying things I did specifically. So maybe you had an opportunity to talk to patients and maybe comfort them in between appointments. So anything you did is also going to be really important, as well as things you observe. So make a note exactly of what you did, how you felt about that experience, and any skills you utilise. So if you were talking to a patient, maybe you were having to demonstrate empathy, communication skills. There's a lot you could talk about there. But me and Sarah will be working on a document which will encourage you to reflect and think in this way. So you'll probably get that after January now, but maybe it's something you can use after your work experience, and maybe you have something else lined up that you can use it for as well. But really good question, and actually one for me to reflect on how to help you guys best reflect on your work experiences, but hopefully that helps. So a question from Zinat: would a student applying to the EMDP with high stats that enables them to get into the normal medicine course more likely get an interview than someone who just about meets EMDP criteria? So Zinat, that's a really good question. The EMDP has probably, it's more complicated as far as an admissions point of view, because as well as your sort of pure academic criteria, lots of other things are taken into consideration from a widening participation perspective. And so I can't exactly outline the process in terms of it's this, then this, then this. Each student's application is kind of, looked at for its merits and then compared to other students' applications. And so there's lots of things we consider, prior GCSE grades, the UCAT, widening participation, contextual considerations, and obviously having to meet those predicted grades as well at A level, and also your school. So one thing that people do sometimes slip up on, they might have spent a year at a selective school, and that would automatically make them ineligible. So lots of things are considered. So in some sense, if you have really good GCSEs, you've got a really good UCAT score, of course your application is going to be stronger than someone who doesn't have those things, but also that's weighed up against widening participation criteria as well. And we use things like postcode measures, which basically look at deprivation in areas, how many people access higher education, and then we also look at priority groups as well. So if someone's been in care, all these things are considered. And so each application is, we like to use the term, looked at holistically. And so I can't say the exact process, but all I can say to you is each application is looked at fairly for its merits to create that EMDP cohort. So it doesn't look like there are any new questions as it stands, but quite a few new people have joined, so welcome to those of you that have joined. And Ashir, really nice to hear from a new K+er. And I know you have your induction next week, so I will see you there. I will be popping along briefly to talk about my lecture programme. So if you haven't signed up to that, Ashir, make sure you sign up. And for those of you who are new on the call, please sign up to the lecture programme as well. Applications close next week. So if you haven't signed up, sign up, because then that's a chance to become part of a community of students all interested in a medicine and dentistry course. And so definitely sign up to that. It's fairly low investment from you guys. Turn up to whatever you like. If you turn up to enough lectures, you will get a certificate at the end of it. Has the interviews for both EMDP and Dent courses begun yet? So those haven't started yet, Zina, I believe. So the dentistry ones are still being decided, and EMDP I don't believe has started yet. The standard medicine course has. So just hold on for a moment if you haven't heard anything. This is a long process, and so don't feel discouraged if you haven't heard anything or if you don't hear anything by Christmas. Hopefully you will hear something soon, or you'll hear from other medical schools as well. So I take it you've applied to other places. But yeah, don't feel too concerned. And you can also get in touch with King's Admissions via King's Apply if you want to chase anything up. If we get interviews for both EMDP and Dent course, do we get different interviews? I take it you mean interviewers for the interviews. Usually students don't apply for dentistry and medicine. I take it you mean the ESDP course, so the standard dentistry and enhanced dentistry course, or the EMDP and the standard medicine course. So both of those, it's a good question actually, and one people do often ask, and one I'm very happy to answer now. So those two courses, so imagine you apply to the EMDP and the standard medicine course, they're treated as entirely separate applications, and so you will get a separate interview for both. So if you've applied to both those courses, because hopefully you really like King's, you will get a separate interview, and more than likely you'll have different interviewers for both, because lots of different volunteers take part in the interview process. So it's very unlikely you get the same interviewer for both. So you'll get two different interviewers, because it'll be a panel of two people for each interview, and they're treated entirely separately. So say you don't do quite as well on one of them, say the first one, you kind of have that second chance if you've applied to both courses. But hopefully you do well on both, and then you get offers potentially to do both courses, but they're treated entirely separately. But that's a good question. So another question from Ashir, and I saw the entry requirement said that you for the course you need A star in biology or chemistry and A in either biology, chemistry, maths or psychology. So yeah, this is for dentistry. It's a good question this year as well about this kind of equal weighting of subjects that is treated. So maths, psychology would be exactly the same. So if you had, say, A star in biology, you had your A in psychology, and then say you had an A in English literature or something, that was your third subject, that'd be great. You would meet the entry requirements. So it doesn't make any difference if you do maths or psychology as long as you're doing one, so you meet those entry requirements. But yeah, really good question. Thank you for the thumbs up to the lecture programme, much appreciated. It is great, and we have some really good speakers. For those of you that took part maybe last year, you are more than welcome to take part again. The core programme of speakers will be largely the same because we have the same sort of great people. They always want to be involved, so I keep that core programme of speakers is going to be largely similar. However, I will have some new content on the UCAT, on work experience, and on, say, personal statements and interviews. So more on that reflection, as I discussed earlier in answer to Ashir's question. So if you were involved last year, you're more than welcome to join us this year as well. And it can be a forum for you to have your questions answered. And you could just turn up to whatever lectures you wanted. As long as you don't mind getting my emails each week, you can just ignore them if you've already been to that lecture before. Great. So yeah, really, really great. So Safa, I assume your name is, based on your Instagram handle. Yeah, if you were involved last year, you'll have a place this year because there's no cap on places for me. As long as you meet that minimum non-selective state school criteria, you will have a place on the lecture programme. And that's what I love about it. More often than not with our programmes, we have to say no to a lot of people because there's a limit on places. The lecture programme, there's absolutely no limit. So my intention is to have as many people on there as possible to make you feel part of that community. So Sarah, a question from you. A star, A for EMDP is absolutely fine. It's funny, I get this question an awful lot about if I exceed the criteria. So the EMDP is A, B, B, and you've got to have biology and chemistry with an A in either biology or chemistry. And a lot of people ask, if I have much higher grades, is that a bad thing? And actually, of course it's not. That is just a minimum requirement. And one thing I like to remind students as well is that those obviously are just predicted grades as it stands. So they're not your actual grades at the moment. And so, of course, it's good to be able to say, I'm predicted A star, A star, A. However, you haven't quite got those grades yet. And so, in some sense, what's more important for your application is what you've currently got in your UCAT and things like your prior GCSE grades and your SJT in the UCAT as well. That's all really, really important because these are things you've achieved. However, you need to meet that minimum A-level standard, which you would have with those predicted grades, which is great, by the way. Well done for achieving those. And I hope you've obviously done biology and chemistry. Otherwise, you wouldn't be eligible, so I assume you have. So Ashir has asked another question. Thank you, Ashir. So the question is, so I've only got 5 minutes left, by the way, everyone, and then I will sign off. Thanks to those of you that have joined this evening. Really appreciate it. And I will continue these throughout 2023. If there is enough interest and people seem to like them. So Ashir's asked, what is your level of ranking as to what you look at in an applicant? For example, A-levels, UCAT, GCSEs, interview, what is the order? So another good question, Ashir, and obviously a really important one for you guys. I can't say to you exactly what, the percentage is given to each of those things. However, the UCAT is very, very important for both medicine and dentistry, and in particular for the standard entry courses, it is very, very important. So typically for those standard entry courses, you do want to be in those sort of top 3 deciles. That's quite important. However, there's no sort of cut-off as it says on our website, but having a really good UCAT is important for King's Dentistry and Medicine, but also having things like strong achieved GCSE grades is also useful and will help your application. In terms of the order, the interview is the final thing you do before you're given an offer, besides actually doing your A-levels and getting your grades. So at the point in which you get the interview, you've already moved on to that next step. So it goes your GCSEs, UCAT, predicted grades. Cool. Okay, that applicant, we want to give them an interview. Once you're at the interview stage, it's how you perform in the interview. That is now it. That is the focus. The interview is the most important thing, because you've sort of passed that first step. And then obviously once you've passed the interview, in inverted commas, and hopefully done well and been given an offer, your final step is to just get those grades. And once you've got the grades of your offer, which will be, in the case of standard dentistry, A star 8A, you'll have your you'll be given your place on the program. So in order again, I guess then it's, predicted grades, UCAT, predicted grades, GCSEs and UCAT together, then your interview, then getting your actual grades, then you're in. That's kind of the process. So I hope that helps. So we've only got 3 minutes left. Any sort of final questions? Do you get an interview starting from higher UCAT? So yeah, another good question, Sarah. So the UCAT is really, really important. So getting that SJT as well, band 1 and 2, will definitely help your application. And having a UCAT in the top 2 or 3 deciles, if you've applied for the standard course, will definitely help and will be an important factor in terms of whether you're offered an interview. For the EMDP, it's less so. So as I said before, there's more consideration given to those external factors. And so for the EMDP, I wouldn't, if you didn't do as well in the UCAT, you may still get an interview offer because the other contextual things are taken into account. So don't share your UCAT score or anything here, and if you emailed it, I wouldn't be able to say exactly anyway. You'll just have to wait from admissions. But obviously having a good UCAT score will help you, particularly for those standard entry courses. So yeah, this basically brings us to the end of the Q&A. I will post this, hopefully, Sarah, hope you do get an interview, and I will be running these in the new year as well. Probably sometime in mid-January I'll get started again, so hopefully you'll have an interview offer by then, Sarah, and if you want to join again and then start talking about interview top tips, I'll be more than happy to do that for you. But yeah, I will publish this on YouTube just as a kind of recording for anyone that missed it, and I do hope these are useful. I think if my colleague Sarah's there, Sarah, if you could post that link to the little valuation form. You don't have to do this. I've got some spare vouchers. If anyone completes this evaluation form, you'll basically go into a little lottery to get a free voucher, just to tell me whether you find these useful and whether I should continue doing these in the new year. But my intention is to keep doing these because it seems like a few of you guys are finding them useful, and it's another way to connect with our students. So I will continue. But yeah, thanks everyone, and as I said, this will be the final one for 2022, and feel free to reach out to us as well via outreachformedicine@kcl.ac.uk if you want any further advice. We can help you on there. But yes, I will sign off now, and yeah, Merry Christmas everyone, because it's the last one for 2022, and I hope everyone has a good year, and I will see you in 2023. Goodbye.